Hello, this is Joseph Drust. In this last video using the Zbrush Ghillie based foundation by Tactical Concealment, I'll be covering some new FiberMesh functionality inside of Zbrush 4R4. This video will be covering how to use FiberMesh to create the loose strips of burlap or jute that attach to this webbing of the actual Viper. Now here we have a picture from the Department of Defense of a ghillie suit. The material is usually grouped in 5 to 10 strands, and then it's knotted to an underlying webbing. These strands are usually dyed to match the local foliage of the area where the actual ghillie will be worn. So here you have the jute, and you can see the underlying webbing of mesh that the actual jute is being tied to. And then these strands just kind of lap over top of it to create a uneven silhouette on the actual soldier. Here you can see the underlying webbing, and then the pieces of jute are just knotted to it, and it's used to break up the silhouette of the soldier. As you also notice, sometimes various foliage has been plucked from the environment and also has been attached to the webbing the same way to kind of give up more variation, and then also using the natural colors from these actual pieces of foliage to help blend the soldier into the environment. So here we have the hood inside of ZBrush with the actual jute applied to it. Now all these little strands are created using FiberMesh inside of ZBrush 4R4. So I'm going to go through and show how I created one strand, and then using some of the new features for FiberMesh inside of 4R4 to kind of position them around, and then come back in later and do some quick sculpting on them. Now here we have just the base layers of the Viper. As you can see, I've removed a lot of the other insert mesh objects from this actual Z tool. They're still in another file, but sometimes I'll just kind of isolate just the parts I need to work on, and then I'm able to merge those back in later onto the full object. So here I just have the different pieces of cloth and then the actual webbing that has been merged together into one subtool. And this was the webbing that was created using the insert mesh objects in the previous tutorial. So to start off, first thing I need to do is generate an emitter to generate the fiber mesh from. I could start masking on this actual element and generate fibers and then comb them all out, but I kind of want to get them created as they would actually be in real life. So I'm going to make an emitter and then spawn the jute fiber mesh out of it and then place them on the actual webbing of the model. So to do that, I'm going to hit comma to open up Lightbox here at the top. I'm going to go to Tool. I'm going to hit this little button over here to expand it to give me a larger window, and then I'm just going to select the polysphere and double click it, and then hit comma again to close Lightbox. So now I have a polysphere. I'm just going to come down here to the Geometry tab, go to Subdivision 1, and then do a Delete Higher. So now I just have this simple polysphere object. Now I'm going to go back to my original file with all the Viper pieces, and I'm just going to append that polysphere into here. And so it should come in looking like this. Now I'm going to select that polysphere. I'm going to hit Solo to isolate it. And I'm going to turn off perspective so I can see this better. And now I need to create an emitter for this. So basically what I want to do to emit this fiber mesh out is I want to isolate like a chunk of geometry from this mesh and mask it, just so I have a little bit of fibers hanging off. I could start masking this whole thing, but it's going to take me a little bit to kind of generate together. You also can use any certain object for an emitter. I just have been using the polysphere lately, so all my fiber strands that I've been saving out are relative to this function I'm going to do here. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down here to the deformation tab. I'm going to go to flatten, turn on Y, and then just flatten -100. And that's going to cut that polysphere in half basically and flatten this backside down. Now I'm going to come in and isolate this square of geometry right here, and this is what I'm going to use for my actual emitter for the fiber mesh. So I'm just going to hold Control and Shift, drag this out, hold Alt to turn it red, hide that part, do the same thing on the other side, then on the bottom, then on the top. Oops. So now I have that little square of geo. Now since I did it from the bottom view, you can see I also have a top square of geo as well. So I just need to isolate this bottom one, so I'm just going to hold Control Shift again, do the green drag, and then just isolate bottom. And now right here, I'm just going to quickly mask it. And this is going to be my emitter for my FiberMesh. So now I'm going to come up to the actual FiberMesh tab. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to hit this Lightbox to Fibers button, which is going to open up Lightbox and show me a bunch of fibers that have come preset inside of ZBrush. Now these two here are ones for the Ghillie that I've already made, so I could load those in. ZBrush FiberMesh has the option to save or open any existing FiberMesh that you've created. So I have two here ready to go, but I'm actually going to show you how I created these from one of these starter templates. Now recently the preset I've usually been starting a lot of my fiber meshes from have been this Fiber 78. So I'm just going to select that and double click it, and then I'm going to hit comma to close Lightbox. And so here we have our plane again, and you can see the fibers being drawn out of it. Now this just looks like grass right now, so we need to change it to bring it back to that kind of burlap twine kind of look. So I'm coming here to FiberMesh. I'm going to hold Control and Shift and click on this to open up all these panels. First thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually rotate this plane so it's facing down, so my emitter is, straight vertical and not having the plane face me. So I'm just going to make sure it's straightened down, and I'm just going to turn preview on and off. And what that's going to do, if there's any gravity, it's going to reset the gravity based on your camera position. So just one quick thing you can do is just turn it on and off real quick, and you'll see it update. You can also change any of the sliders in here, and your gravity will update as well. So now with that updated, I'm just going to increase the gravity to 1, and then I'm going to change some of these values in here to start getting that burlap jute kind of look out of here. So the first thing I want to do is increase my length, so I'm just going to scale that up to max, so 2000. I want to change my width, so I'm going to open this, and then I'm just going to hit reset to bring it back to where it started. And then I want a fat strand all the way through, so I'm just going to take these little edges here and drag them all up to the top, so I end up with something like this. And I don't really want any variation for the length, so I'm just going to turn that down to 0. I zero out a lot of these little settings here, so by area 0, this by 0. By mask, I'm going to max it all the way up to 5. Max fibers, I need a little bit less than I have here, so I'm going to try something like 0.05 and see what that gives me. So I'm starting to get little strands. Coverage, this is also going to determine how thick these strands are, so I'm going to put this up to say about 2000. So I start getting those strands kind of generating there, and I want this to be constant, so that's down. Root and tip, since it's a burlap piece of twine, I want these to be the same, so I'm going to put 1.4 here and 1.4 there. I don't really need slim, I don't really want it to revolve or twist, so I'm going to turn twist to 0. Gravity's good, all these I'll zero out, and I want maybe, zoom out here quick, a little bit of random gravity here. So I'm going to change this little slider over here to say something like 0.225. And so now we get kind of like that grass sprawling effect from the gravity. So that's kind of what we want there. You can see here it's tessellated extremely low right now, so I'm going to up these segments. So I'm going to put about 20. And so now I'm starting to get that jute kind of look out of these fibers. It's also a little bit hard to see because of this coloring right here, so I'm just going to change my base color to black. So you can just click on any of these colors and drag, and it'll do like a pick, and then I'm going to change the ends to white. And I usually do white and black for a lot of fibers because you can eventually color them later, and so if you establish your roots and your tips as different colors, when you apply another color over top of it, it'll kind of do like a colorized type effect that you'll have in Photoshop. So it works pretty well. And I'm going to turn off polyframes. If you hit BPR, you can test your fiber render. I'm going to make sure the profile's to 1. I'm going to come down here and up the sides so I get 8 divisions across the surface of the actual fiber. And I hit BPR again. So you can see now I'm kind of getting those strands of like fibers out of that, and they look round, but it's only in the BPR render. So once I hit accept, I'm still going to have extremely low active points, but since I have these sides up to 8, it's going to render nice and smooth. And then for these anisotropic stuff here, I usually turn these all the way down to 0. I can change them later, but if I want to make sure that the fibers are generating correctly and I'm not getting shadows from other objects, I usually 0 them out. And I think that might be, gravity profile by default's good. I don't really need to mess with color. I think that's pretty good for the start of the jute there. So you can see we got a nice and stringy kind of effect going on. Now I do have a little more fibers here than 5 to 10, because 5 to 10 would, if they were knotted and coming back down, would give you about 20 end pieces. But I don't really want to go through and place, millions of these little pieces of jute on the actual Viper. So I'm just going to leave this where it's at. Have a little bit more than the actual reality of 5 to 10 strands per clump. So that's it for those. One more quick thing that I recommend is coming over here and hitting this box and just selecting a texture. And what this is going to do, it's going to assign a texture to your fibers, but more importantly, it's going to establish UVs for your fibers. If you don't have a texture map here, and when you hit accept, you're not going to have any UVs generated for your fibers. So even if you don't want UVs, you may end up, down the line finding that you actually did want UVs. Well, if you didn't have a texture map in here when you hit accept, it's going to be an extreme pain to get UVs generated on every single one of these fiber strands. So a little best practice, just load an image in here. You can turn off later, extremely easy. You can also delete UVs later, extremely easy. But when it comes to recreating UVs on fiber strands, you don't really want to go down that road. So put the image in here and it'll automatically generate UVs for you. So after you have all this ready to go, you probably want to save your fibers out. So this way you can bring them in later if you ever need to use them again. So you just hit save. Now if you save them to your ZBrush ZFibers preset folders, so Pixologic Zbrush 4R4 ZFibers presets, if you save them into this folder, when you actually come up here and hit this light box to fibers, it's actually going to load your fiber into here. So you'll be able to come up, hit lightbox to fibers, your fiber preset will actually be stored in here, and then you can just double click on it. So just saving to that folder inside of ZBrush will allow you to do that. So that looks pretty good for the fibers. I'm just going to go ahead and hit accept. So now I'm going to come up back to the top here, and I should have a new tool that was created underneath the Polysphere tool. Since I have Solo still on, I just need to come down and click on it, and now it will show up. Now this is still a fiber aware object, but now it is actually geometry. So if you rotate, you won't see it flash in and flash out. And if you zoom in, you can see it's, since I set my profile settings to that 1 and 20 up here where I had profile and segments, you can see they're just single-sided pieces of geometry. So I'm looking at about 2,000 points per clump. So if I apply a whole bunch of these on the actual Viper webbing, I'm not going to go too crazy over the poly limit there. So it's pretty low res. And then since I have this sides on and subdivision turned on, when I render this with BPR, it turns in these nice kind of fiber strands. Now since I also set this to 1 and 20 earlier, I can also increase the radius here. So if I find out later that, hey, these little pieces of jute are too thin, I can come over here and just up this number here, and then when I render in BPR, it's going to give me thicker strands. So pretty cool little thing that's built inside of FiberMesh.